So we're going to learn a little bit of Haggadah, and we're going to start off with a story. So the story is like this. It's an interesting story, and it's really the beginning of the Haggadah. We say that this is we're slaves, and then we're going to start. Even if everyone's wise, we should start the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, speak about the story. And the idea is mitzvah l'saper b'Yetzias Mitzrayim. The mitzvah is to tell the story of going out of Egypt. So what is the mitzvah, particularly for Pesach night? That Pesach night versus the Schiras Yetzias Mitzrayim, the remembering what's going on in Mitzrayim every single day of the year, is that on Pesach night, there's a lot of distinctions. The famous Reb Chaim has few distinctions in the Brisker Haggadah, but the main distinction is like the Pri Megadim also writes that it has to be done b'derech sipur. You have to tell a story. That it's question and answers. One thing is shaylos v'tshuvas, is a question and answer. That's the way the whole Haggadah is that the child will ask, then you'll respond. So it has to be their question and answer. That's what the Rambam says, that even if a person is sitting alone, they should also, if their wife should ask them, someone else should ask them. You should ask yourself. It should be there. It should be in a question-answer format. But also very important that it's the idea of telling a story. And we have to understand what is the idea of specifically talking about a story. What is the idea of telling a story? And the way the Haggadah actually starts is Maisa. The Haggadah actually starts, and it was a story, a tale. This story is a story that is not found in Chazal. It's only found, which means it's not found in any of the Midrashim or any of the Gemaras that we have. The story is indigenous to the Haggadah. The story is found in the Haggadah. Now, where did the story come from? It could be it was some mechilta that we lost, but the story, the way Tosfos and the Rishonim, when they quote the story, they quote Haggadah the Pischa, that this is the story that's quoted in the Haggadah. That's the story. So we know the story from the Haggadah itself. And what's the story? So the story is that Maisa, there was a story of Rabbi Eilizer, the story of Rabbi Eilizer, and Rabbi Yeshua. Everyone's familiar with the story, right? Rabbi Eilizer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eilizer ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Tarfon. These are five, obviously, great Tanaim. And they were sitting in Bnei Brak, and they were speaking about the story. They were telling a story. It's a story about people telling a story. Maisa. It's a story within a story in Bnei Brak. So we have to understand a lot of levels. What's the point that they were telling the story? What's Oisa Laila? Why is it important to know where they were sitting? They were sitting in Bnei Brak, and they were sitting in somewhere else. Why it's I mean, there's a lot of questions. So the simple answer how this is a continuation is whoever is going to continue the story, speaking about the story going out of Mitzrayim, is praiseworthy. And in the older version, in Sefer Pardes L'Rashi, it's Umaisa, and there was a story. So even if we would be very wise, it's still a mitzvah to say the story to go out the entire night. And there's a story that happened. That the story proves the point. Umaisa Shahaya, this is the story that happened. And the next passage, which we have in the Gemara, which is Gemara Brachas, Amr Belazar ben Azariah, in the Rambam's version, and in other Rishonim, it's Amr Lahem Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So it's all. So in other words, it's all a continuation. Exactly. You say you have to keep Yetzias Mitzrayim. This is the story, and in that night, this is what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah told them. It's a hemshech sipur. It's a continuation of the story. So this story, a similar story, is found in the end of Psachim and Tosefta. So if you look at your first Maramakim, this is the Maramakim. The first source is like this. Yeah. So in Ches, Yud Ches, Tosefta and End of Psachim. So like this. V'chayiv Adam la'asik b'chos ha'Pesach kol ha'layla. Afilu beino lebein b'noi, afilu beino la'atzmoi, afilu beino le'talmidoi. That a person has to involve themselves la'asik b'hilchos ha'Pesach, to deal with the laws of Pesach. And then he brings on a story. Maisa, there was a story. Biragam Liel, the Skanim, Shoyim Mesuvim Basis Ben Zunim Belud. Basis Ben Zunim. They were sitting in the home of Basis Ben Zunim. In Lud. Different place. Similar story, but different place. We'll see the difference of the story. Vayusukim Behilchas HaPesach. It's not so far from each other. That's correct. But it's not the same place. It's not so far, but it's definitely not the same place. Also, far is relatively today. It's not so far because it's 15-minute car drive. But in those days, it's a few-hour donkey ride. So there were sukkim, and also by the way, Bnei Brak is not much exactly where Bnei Brak is, and Lud is not exactly where Lud is, but it's around. It's definitely around that area. And they were oisik in Hilchas HaPesach. They were learning the laws of Pesach the entire night. Higbiyum lifneim. It was lifted in front of them. What's Igbiyah Lifneim? Igbiyah Lifneim means, Igbiyah Lifneim can mean different things. It can either mean simply like the Chazon Yecheskel, which is the Yecheskel Abramsky, that's the wrote on the Tosefta. He writes that it simply means that they opened the window. So it was dark, the window was closed, the shutters were closed, the Chaloin and the Tarisim were closed, and then they opened up the window and they were able to see. The Brisker of Tainas know that it means that they took away the matzah. That the matzah was sitting in front of them. Because Yochem Rosh Chodesh, we say, I feel matzah menuchim lefenecha. That when is the mitzvah? When do we have to say the story of going out of Egypt? When you have matzah in front of you. So even though they were yaitz of the mitzvah already before, many hours before, but they kept the matzah on the table, so they should say the story while there's matzah on the table. We're not noig like this at all. We don't custom, because our simple interpretation of that is why Why don't we? Why shouldn't we eat after the carbon Pesach? Why don't we eat after the final eating of the Afikoman? No, that's why we eat last. But why don't you eat emaftir achar Pesach? Why don't we eat afterwards? Why don't you take a drink? Why don't you eat after the Afikoman? Oh, because you should have the tam in your mouth. Why do you need the tam in the mouth? The reason why you have the tam in the mouth, because then you have matzah menachem lefenecha, because you have the matzah in front of you. It fits in your taste buds, so you don't have the matzah literally in front of you, but it's tasted it, so you have it in your mouth. So therefore, you're going to still be yoytz in the mitzvah of Sipur Yisiyas Mitzrayim. That's a simple reason. This is the simple reason why we don't eat afterwards. That's why there's a famous Avnei Nezer says you could eat after chatzos because the mitzvah is only after chatzos. So menachem lefenecha, but after the chatzos it's not. Whatever. But there's a big deal in the pasuk about this. But the simple reason is you want to have the matzah, the taste of your matzah in your mouth, so you keep it. Okay. So whatever the case is, they took away the matzah or they opened up the windows, and v'hochelu beis hamedrash, and then they went to beis hamedrash, and this is the end of this is Psachim. Then the Gemara Psachim ends with this. If it's a klal or prat, whatever, that the Gemara finishes off on two brachas. Okay, what's the difference between this story and the story that we have in front of us in the Haggadah? So the basic difference of the story is that over there it's with Rab Gamliel, right? V'skenim. Now, who's Rab Gamliel? If you know a little bit about this time period, is that Rabbi Gamliel is the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who's son of Rabbi Gamliel Agadol, who's a grandson of Hillel Zaken from the Nisim. They're the early Yisrael. That's from this strand. Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi, and then he was dethroned, right? And then who became the Nasi? Elazar ben Azariah. I'm like 70 years old. He was 18 years old because he became a Nasi at a very young age, right? His beard turned white overnight. Okay, so they all live the same time. In fact, Rebbe Lezer is Rebbe Lezer ben Hurkanis. Rebbe Lezer is Rebbe Lezer Agadol. Rebbe Lezer Agadol is Rabbi Akiva's Rebbe. He's Rabbi Akiva's teacher. Rabbi Shua is also Rabbi Akiva's teacher. Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah is the Nasi. Reb Tarfon was also a teacher of Rabbi Akiva in the beginning, and then was like a Talmud Chaver. He was a friend of Rabbi Akiva. So these are all older people than Rabbi Akiva. Now, what are they doing in Bnei Brak? Is that we'll see why they got to Bnei Brak. But the only one that lived in Bnei Brak that we know that lived in Bnei Brak was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva lived in Bnei Brak. Mibnei Bonav Shel Sisra Lamatay Bnei Brak. When Chazal say the children of Sisra, the grandchild, is Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva lived in Bnei Brak. He was the Mord Aser of Bnei Brak. He was the Rav of Bnei Brak. Reb Gamliel was the Mord Aser, was the Rav in Lud. Besides, he lived in Lud. Okay. Now the story in this Tosefta, I just want this very clear to define the story. The story that the Tosefta is Reb Gamliel is sitting, possibly with the same people. Possibly, if Rabbi Gamliel is the Gadol B'Yisrael, who's he sitting with? I would assume he's sitting with Rabbi Shua, with Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Akiva. Those are the guys. Those are the people that he should be sitting with. But the Bryce doesn't say that. Stuff doesn't say that.
Well, it says Canaan.
It's Canaan, correct. But it doesn't say who they are. The difference is, what's very clear is, we'll see soon, that one is a story that's marked by Rabbi Gamliel, and one is going to be a story that's marked by Rabbi Akiva. And the difference in the way this story is, it's important to understand this, is that the story, the way it's written in Tosefta, is that they were involved in learning the laws of Pesach the whole night. So what were they doing? They were discussing halachas. That's what it says, Hilchas Pesach. In our story, it says they were telling a story about the going out of Mitzrayim. It doesn't say that they were learning. It says they were telling a story. Now, of course, there's learning and telling a story can be part of the same thing. You can tell a story, and through telling a story, you're learning. You're learning halachas. Or you're learning halachas or telling a story. But the question is, what is the main idea? Is that over here, it's a ma'isa shahaya, it's a story that happens, and telling a story. The question is, now, if Rabbi Akiva is the youngest, besides Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, is the youngest of the group. He's a Talmud of everybody else. He's a Talmud of Rabbi Elazar, he's a Talmud of Rabbi Tarfon, and he's Talmud of Rabbi Shua. Why is it that they're all sitting by Rabbi Akiva's home? Why are they all sitting by Rabbi Akiva's place of where he lived? Especially if he's from the younger ones. If you say they went to Rabbi Gamliel's house, it's possible to say they went to Rabbi Gamliel's house. Why? Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi, and they went to make a Seder by the Nasi. But why are they sitting in the house of Rabbi Akiva?
Maybe a nice house.
So there's a few problems. First of all, that Rabbi Elazar Agadol says that if Shabech Zatzlonim, the Gemara says Sukkah, that don't leave their house for Yom Tov. So Rabbi Elazar Agadol, who's the Rebbe, says you should not leave your house on Yom Tov. So there's a Sfas Emes. The Sfas Emes argues, it's a very big chiddush. The Sfas Emes says that this didn't happen on Pesach night. Who said it happened on Pesach night? It says a story that they were sitting with 5 sages talking about Now, why were they sitting in Mesapir on that night? I don't know. It's a good question. But it was not a Pesach. Because that answers a lot of questions. The answer for the question is, how could they be sitting if one is the Talmud? The Talmud Rabbi doesn't recline. Or else he gives...
Why is it in the Haggadah?
Huh?
Why is it in the Haggadah?
No, because it's talking about the idea of a Sipur Yitzis.
The point is to make that the Chiyuv of Sipur Yitzis
It's on that night. So it's a good child. It's a good child. Also, what's called Ois Alayla that night? Kol Ois Alayla sounds that night. It sounds like night of Pesach. This is Sfas Emes Mahalach. Anyways, he says this. Everyone's not so happy with what he said, but this is the Sfas Emes is Sfas Emes. You have to, if he says something, he says something. But let's hold this off. So let's try to figure out if no one lived in Bnei Brak, what are they doing on Bnei Brak, and what are they doing Pesach night? Let's say we go to regular Svara. What are they doing Bnei Brak on Pesach night in this story? So let's try to draw a parallel between this story and the story in the Tosefta. What's another difference between the story is that one is a Gamliel and one is a Rabbi Akiva. I'll tell you in a second why it's Rabbi Akiva. Where do we have Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Gamliel in the story of the Haggadah itself? So they also appear in the Haggadah elsewhere. Where Rabbi Gamliel famously says, "Kol shalei mishal jdorim." A person doesn't say Pesach Matzah Mara. It doesn't say Pesach Shal Nachal Shumad. It doesn't say why you eat Pesach, why you eat Matzah Mara. Lo Yitzadei Chavasei. That's Rabbi Gamliel. Okay. On Pesach night in Rabbi Gamliel's home. Okay, let's just imagine we're sitting by Rabbi Gamliel's home, where they were Misapim Yitzias Mitzrayim. What was the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim that night, according to Rabbi Gamliel? Pesach Matzah Marek Shalei Tzadei Chavasei. Right. It means Shalei Tzadei Chavasei can mean two things. Shalei Tzadei Chavasei can mean, which is a little shver. Shalei Tzadei Chavasei can mean Shalei Tzadei Chavasei a Matzah Mar and Pesach, that you don't feel the obligation of eating the Pesach correctly. But the simple way, and the Rashi learns it, and the Rambam learns it like that Gamliel, he brings down Gamliel, whoever doesn't say these three things, doesn't feel his obligation. V'zau Iker Shal Haggadah. That's the Iker of the Haggadah. So according to Rabbi Gamliel, what happened on Gamliel in the Homer of Gamliel on Pesach night, they were oisik and they said these three things. They said, why you eat Pesach, why you eat Matzah, why you Mar. That's a din, right? That's a halacha. Where does Rabbi Akiva appear in the Haggadah? Huh? The Rabbi Yehuda knows him later, a little further, right after that, by the Makkos. When it says how many Makkah, call Makkah of Makkah Shiva Kodesh Baruch Hu Mitzrayim. So Rabbi Akiva says, Menayin shekol Makkah Shiva Kodesh Baruch Hu Mitzrayim shechamish Makkos. That he says that the Makkos have 5 dimensions of Makkos. Now it's very clear that Rabbi Akiva is talking about what? About the story. If you went to Rabbi Akiva's house and he's doyrish, what is Rabbi Akiva doyrish? Rabbi Akiva is talking about a story. He's telling you, by the way, the Makkos were not one-dimensional. It had 5-dimensional. It reached, according to the Rakachava, and there's a long sikha about this idea, that it reached the 5 madregas of Eish, Mayim, Ruach, Hafa, and Koyach HaYuli. However you understand it, that the Makkos penetrated the entire physicality. Eish, the fire, wind, earth, and water, and the essence of this thing. So all 5 dimensions. What is Rabbi Akiva talking about? Rabbi Akiva is talking about he's speaking about the story about going out of Mitzrayim. Right? Rabbi Gamliel is talking about the din, and Rabbi Akiva is talking about the story. There's a chiddush that the Abarbanel writes. I'm not sure where the Abarbanel gets it, but the Abarbanel is the Abarbanel, so we can assume that he had a good marker. The Abarbanel writes that Dayenu comes from Rabbi Akiva. Kamamal is also a Kodesh Baruch Hu. That whole thing right after that comes after the Chomesh Makkos was composed by Rabbi Akiva. So not only is Rabbi Akiva talking about the Makkos, but he's talking about the whole story. That he gave us the man, he crosses the sea. Rabbi Akiva is expanding upon the story of the going out of Mitzrayim. Versus Rabbi Gamliel is talking about the halachas. Okay. Now again back. Rabbi Gamliel is the Nasi. Rabbi Eلیעזر is the oldest, and he's the Rebbe. Why aren't they by Rabbi Eلیעזر? Why aren't they by Rabbi Yeshua? Why aren't they by Rabbi Eلیעזר ben Azariah? Why are they not by Rabbi Tarfon? So there's a. That's the general question, and then the second question is, why is it important that they were telling a story, and why is it important that it was the Bnei Brak, and why is it important that their students show up? What's so negay? What's relevant to these points? So there's a svara from the Magalis Hayam. Rabbi Magalis. He wrote this in the Haggadah, but I don't have his Haggadah, but I have a sefer from Magalis Hayam. It's also there in Sanhedrin. He says an idea. Again, the big question is why are they sitting? Why are these sages sitting by Rabbi Akiva's house or Rabbi Akiva's city? And they're sitting in Bnei Brak. Rabbi Akiva's the Rav in Bnei Brak. Why are they by Rabbi Akiva on Pesach night, from all nights? Why are they with their family? Where are their children? Where's their wives? Whatever. This is the question. So he has an idea like this. So he brings down the Maratz Chai says, how is it possible that they're all sitting by Rabbi Akiva in Bnei Brak? Rabbi Eلیעזר is the one that said, which we mentioned before, Rabbi Eلیעזer says, I'm very it's praiseworthy the lazy people that don't leave their house for Pesach, which means I should be in the house. This is Maratz Chai asks, how is it possible? Rabbi Eلیעזer Gadol ends up by Rabbi Akiva on Rabbi Akiva's night. Again, the Sas Emes answer answers this question, right? Because it's not Pesach, so it's not a Shaila. But let's say we'll go with the regular Mahalach that it was Pesach. So the question is, why is he in Bnei Brak? So he writes that in his Pirush on the Haggadah, Bear Maim, he explains that there's a Mishnah in Maase Sheni, Maase Bir Gamliel Vaskenim Shay Boim Besfina Erev Pesach Yom Abir Shal Maises. That the Mishnah that says in Maase Sheni, where it talks about Rabbi Gamliel returning on a ship on Erev Pesach, which is Man Abir, when you have to get rid of all the Maase Shenis, if you didn't need it. So Maase Sheni it comes back Erev Pesach. What's the Be'erech, what's going on over here? This is the Tanoim traveling to Rome. Remember, so they're taking a ship from Israel, Eretz Yisrael. They're traveling to Rome. The Romans are then the rulers of Eretz Yisrael, right? After the destruction of the Churban. This is Be'erech around 50 years after the Churban. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, which is the father of Gamliel, lived through the Churban. And Rabbi Akiva was killed 120, right, like 60 years after the Churban, around that time. Because this is the Harugi Malchus. That's the same time, that time period. Adrian. Anyways, Akitza, this is what happened. They used to go to Rome because the Romans were in control of Eretz Yisrael. Most Jews lived in Eretz Yisrael at the time, so they used to go. Apparently, I don't know why, but apparently they would travel sometime in Adar or something. Maybe the sea is an easier travel. And the Mishnah speaks about them returning on Erev Pesach. So he draws a parallel. It's possible that they came to Yaffo. Now Yaffo is a port city. It's an ancient port city. So they come into Yaffo. Shumul Bnei Brak. Bnei Brak is very close to Yaffo. Because the Pasuk actually says it. The Pasuk over there says, Mul Bnei Brak. It names a couple of cities in Yeshua. It says Bnei Brak, Mul Yaffo. So we know that Bnei Brak, the ancient Bnei Brak, was close to Yaffo. So therefore they came very late. They came very late on Erev Pesach. So and who was the closest person to live next to the port city of Yaffo? Was Rabbi Akiva. So therefore they went to Bnei Brak for Rabbi Akiva. It says if you look at the Mishnah, it says that they can't. In other words, there's a precedent for this. There's a precedent with Tanoim are coming back Erev Yom Kippur, Erev Pesach on a ship. So there's a Bapashtus, if they come back Erev Pesach on a ship, that's where they always traveled around that time. They came one Erev Pesach, was on a ship. They came very late, and there was no Yaffo. They couldn't get to Lud. It was further. The closest city was Bnei Brak. Rabbi Akiva says, I'm a wealthy man. Everyone come stay by me. And they all came to his... They all went to his Pesach. And he says Rabbi Gamliel probably was also on the ship, but he didn't want to go with them. Because Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi... They knew that they weren't able to do Mesubim in front of him. That's a svara. And then he has a whole svara. He says that's how, if you look at the structure where they're sitting, so their Belezim and Azariah will be in the middle. And that's the seating arrangement. So how they're sitting is... It's from the Gemara and Brachas how you figure out how the seating is. The right person, the second person goes to the right, the second goes to the left. Depends if you have 2 people, 3 people. There's the whole thing also with Kfura, how you do this, how you bury people. Anyway, it's not again. The point is, this is the svara of Rav Magalis, is that it was Pashat, it was a coincidence. It was a situation they got to get, and they did it. But of course, that's not. We can't stop there. We can't just say that it was a nice coincidence. They ended up being in Bnei Brak. We have to understand there has to be, we must say that there's some oimik in the fact that there's some depth to the fact that they went to Rabbi Akiva specifically. We have to understand who Rabbi Akiva is and why they went to the Bnei Brak and why they're talking about a story. So, we're going to do something a little different, but it's important to understand this, that every story has a context to a story. Right? Kimuvan. Something happened. It happened during a certain time period. But we have to be very careful how we deal with this issue, because once you put a historical context to an idea, there's always the danger to tie the historical context to the idea and say that the context doesn't exist any longer, so therefore the idea doesn't exist any longer, right? So this is very subtle. I just want to show you. It's a long piece. If you have time to read it, it's a Haggadah piece to read. It's from the Beis Halevi in Parshas Boy, and the Beis Halevi actually talks about a very simple thing. You know the Beis Halevi is, yes? You know what it is? Oh, the Beis Halevi is the brisker of his grandfather, Chaim Soloveitchik's. You know, they used to say about the Beis Halevi, just a side note, the Beis Halevi was married in his first marriage to Lubavitch Chassid. Yep. I think a Baruch Beber is schwer. And the shidduch did not go well. The marriage, they ended up divorcing. Yeah. So they say like this. Reb Chaim, his son, Reb Chaim was a Yedid Neman of the Rebbe Rashab. They worked together, they're very close. He's a big Yedid of the Rebbe Rashab. So much so that the Rayatz writes that one of his chusim that he got well when he was sick was the fact that he was meshamish both his father, the Rashab, and Reb Chaim. So it was a very close kirva. But they used to say, like the Vod says like this, that the Beis Halevi didn't like Chassidim, but he loved Chassidus. Because if you look at the Beis Halevi, it's full of Chassidus. I mean, there's the Arayonis, there's Chassidish Arayonis in the Beis Halevi. First, he was married to a Chassidish, his shver was a big Chassid, and then they learned Chassidus. And he kept on learning Chassidus his whole life, but he didn't like so much Chassidim. That didn't work out so much. But Reb Chaim loved Chassidim, but he didn't like Chassidus. Reb Chaim, you won't find even a shemetz of some type of Chassidish Vart. So that's the word. But this is a very in-depth thing. But he said, it's talking about Pesach, and he talks about a very simple thing about Pesach, which is the idea that Pesach, you're saying that the whole idea of bringing a sheep is because a sheep represents the idols of the Egyptian pagans. That was a pagan god, it was a deity. And this Mekayz Chazal, Mishch v'Kulachem, you should separate yourself from Avodah Zarah. So the idea of bringing a sheep or a goat, which is another form of idol, which is also like a demon goddess, that the idea of bringing these animals as an offering was for Klal Yisrael to break themselves free of. We talked about this last week. Yeah, we talked about this last week, I think. That it's the idea to break yourself free of this Egyptian culture, this like not eating and chametz is part of the Egyptian culture. Also, not to eat from these foods. So then, if you think about it that way, then it's a historical reason. If it's a historical reason, so why would technically we don't bring it? But let's say theoretically we can bring a Korban Pesach. We say, okay, now we don't have to bring a Korban Pesach. If the whole reason for the Korban Pesach was Mishchol Kulachem Avodah Zarah, that's why you bring a tzoyin. You bring a sheep to bring away from Avodah Zarah. No one serves sheep anymore. Maybe some guy, in the village or somewhere in San Francisco. But in general, no, most people are not serving. They don't have their idols as a sheep. They have other idols, not a sheep. So why would you have to bring a sheep? You understand? Once you couch a halacha within a context of a history, it becomes very complicated. You understand what the reason is? Even though Chazal do it. So the way he sees it, he flips it on his head. He says that the halacha creates the narrative, not that the narrative creates the halacha. There's a story, there's a context, and you think, the way to think about it is that the context created the law, since there's a particular context. And the people were idol worshippers of sheep. So therefore the Torah says, take a sheep, and you'll break idol worship. He says it's actually the reverse. The halacha precedes the event, and the event actually stems from the history stems from the halacha. You're following the structure? Let's read what he says. Let's read what he says. It's on the left column, the last column. We'll just read it quickly because we really have to talk about what we're going to talk about. But this is all this introduction. Aval ikar yisoida shel hamitzvah l'lama kachi hamitzvah eina b'shvil zeh ma shehay b'Mitzrayim. It's not because this is the historical context, and because it was Mitzrayim, therefore the mitzvah comes. It's the reverse. The mitzvah matzah, if you say the mitzvah matzah precedes creation, then it exists. And that comes before the history. אבל warum מצד מור שקודם גולס מצרים. והכוח מיצס אלו לא nimmt sich mit Gullus Mitzrayim, רק להפך. די בסחוס מיtzes פסח ומצ מור שיש בלילה הזה, ניצחו גולס מצרים בלילה הזה. And then a few lines later, the loy b'shvil atam nasa mitzvah, rak lahepach, the abur a mitzvah nasa atam. This is a yisoid gadol. It's a very important and big yisoid. We could talk about this. This in itself deserves its own conversation, what it actually means. But let's just hold the thought for a second. When we talk about historical context, is to understand it. But there is an historical context, therefore we're going to talk about it in a second. Rabbi Akiva lives after the Churban. And this is very important to understand. Rabbi Akiva lives after the Churban. Let's see, what's the next one? Okay. Akiva lives after the Churban. And after the Churban, there's a few big pieces there. First of all, Rabbi Akiva is the one that Chazal speak about at the end of the Gemara Makis that says that when they saw Shu'alim Holchabay, when they saw that there were foxes running on the Beis HaMikdash, so everyone was crying. They were boichim because this is the nevuah came true, and they saw that it was desolate in the Beis HaMikdash, the place in the temple of the Beis HaMikdash. But Rabbi Akiva tzachak. Rabbi Akiva was actually laughing. So, and Rabbi Akiva was laughing. He says, if this prophecy came true, certainly the other prophecy will come true. If part of the prophecy in Zechariah will come true, the second prophet will all become true, and eventually the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt. So Rabbi Akiva was able to see hope and be joyful and laugh at a situation where most people would see tragedy and absence of life, which means he was able to see hope and possibility where most people saw hopelessness and impossibility. This is the character of Rabbi Akiva. Part of the character of Rabbi Akiva is because that's actually his life story. Because what's the story of Rabbi Akiva in contrast to the other ones that we say, Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon, and Rishua? These were all Tanoim that were raised as Tanoim. Their parents were Tanoim, the Zaydas were Tanoim, their grandparents were Tanoim. They were raised in households of Talmidei Chachamim, and they were expected to be the next Nasi B'Yisrael, the next Gadol. They were raised that way. Rabbi Akiva was an Amoritz for many years, and he was Chamor. Rabbi Akiva was actually against Talmidei Chachamim. He was an ignoramus, but also fought against it. And then his life was transformed. So Rabbi Akiva actually embodies the quality of looking at a situation where it seems to be bleak and seems the absence of all life. And Rabbi Akiva was a person that actually saw that if I really work hard, I could actually reach something. So if you look at the state of the Beis HaMikdash that's destroyed, Rabbi Akiva was able to be tzachak, was able to laugh in that situation. Rabbi Akiva also in this time period, it's a sidebar, but it's also connected. Rabbi Akiva was also the one that used to carry Shimon bar Kiziva's armor. That when there was the Bar Kochba revolt, the reason why Bar Kochba revolt had any track at all by Klal Yisrael, the reason why anyone joined this battle, which was the idea to throw off the Romans and build another Beis HaMikdash, was because Rabbi Akiva was behind it. Rabbi Akiva was the God of Yisrael, and Rabbi Akiva had a dream. And the Yerushalmi says in Tainus, he had a dream. Darach Kochba Yaakov, he saw a flying star, and he says Kochba is Kuziva, is Bar Kochba, the son of Kochba, he's the son of the star, and he'll be Mashiach. And eventually, Bar Kochba, there was a whole thing with Beitar, and the Beitar fell, and Bar Kochba blamed Rabbi Lezer, and Bar Kochba killed Rabbi Lezer. His soldiers killed Rabbi Lezer, and then Rabbi Akiva retracted. But what comes out is that Rabbi Akiva, also Rabbi Akiva was very wealthy. The Gemara says, the Gemara asks how did Rabbi Akiva become wealthy? For a few different reasons how he became wealthy. He found that he married someone that was wealthy at the end. He also married Kalba Savua's daughter in the beginning. But he also, his hand was the Yad Laniyim. I'll say that his hand was the hand of the poor. Rabbi Akiva is also the one that says, is the principle of the Torah. So Rabbi Akiva was a person that had his pulse. There's certain types of people that are very detached. But Rabbi Akiva was a person that was very much involved. And more than involved, that he was with it. He's with Klal Yisrael. So here's the question. You're living 50 years after the Churban, after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, and you're from the Tanoim. Comes Pesach, and Pesach is Zman of Yitzias Mitzrayim, time that you redeem. So the shaila becomes, what's the real shaila? What's the real question that people are asking at that time? The real question that people are asking at that time is, we should remember the going out of Mitzrayim, but we're in Mitzrayim again. You're talking about redemption. You're saying that a person should sit on the night of Pesach and remember that he went on Mitzrayim, and sit like he's redeemed, and sit with and drink wine and drink derech eretz to be freed. But now we're in Golus again. We're back into exile. When you're sitting right after the Churban Bayesheni, right after the destruction, it's the beginning of a Golus, which at least on some level with the Churban Bayesheni, the destruction of the first Pesach Mikdash, there was this Gala Kitzam. There was a time period. We knew, okay, it's going to be 70 years, and then eventually we'll go back there. So we're going to build a base of English. Okay, the Nevi'im said there was a certain prophecy, we return. But Acharayim Shalayim is Gal Kitzam. The Acharayim that we don't, but there's no cats. There was no exact time. How long are we going to be in Gullus? I don't know. Look, we're 2,000 years later. In other words, you're sitting there and you're saying, Schizim Mitzrayim is the idea to remember the going out of Mitzrayim, which is the Gula. What kind of Gula? What kind of Gula are we experiencing? So the question is a double question. First of all, why B'chal Maskeh Yitzias Mitzrayim B'Leilos? Is there any concept to be Maskeh Yitzias Mitzrayim B'Leilos? Should we remember the going out of Mitzrayim B'Leilos, by night? By night is not just only physically by night. By night is Choshech. Is there idea to be Maskeh Yitzias Mitzrayim B'Leilos? Because you're not in Mitzrayim, and is somehow, if let's say you say the answer is yes, that you should be Maskeh Yitzias Mitzrayim, that you should remember the going out of Mitzrayim, even B'Leilos, even B'Makom HaChoshech, we'll understand why. If that's the reason, if there's some could have this to Maskeh Yitzias Mitzrayim B'Leilos, is it just nostalgic that you should Maskeh Yitzias Mitzrayim even B'Leilos, even though you're in Choshech, even though you're dark, you should remember that you were once free. Why? So you should be nostalgic of a time that you were once free. Or is it something that actually allows you to reach freedom? Is there, and this is the two drashas Chazal that come out of that night, one is that Yemecha Yacha Yom Kol Yemecha Aleilas. One is that it should be Baleilas. What is the other one? Lahavi L'Mois Mashiach. That Lahavi L'Mois Mashiach means to bring to a state of redemption. It doesn't say L'Rabis L'Mois Mashiach. L'Rabis L'Mois Mashiach means that you have to be Maskeh Yitzias Mitzrayim now. And then Kol Yemecha Yacha, all your days also is L'Rabis, to include also times of Mashiach. But it doesn't say L'Rabis Kol Yemecha Mashiach. It says Lahavi L'Mois Mashiach, which means that you have to remember Kol can mean forever. It can be always. It can be forever. Forever means that the remembering of Yitzias Mitzrayim now is lahavi l'mois Mashiach, is what actually brings Mashiach. Right? What? And it won't cease that. When it won't cease that. Exactly. In other words, we're learning two things. We're learning that it's baleilos, and we're also learning that it's lahavi l'mois Mashiach. And we're learning this dafka from Rabbi Akiva. Why? Let's go. There's according to the Gilgal Neshamas, it's important to understand this. That like this. Rabbi Aلیעזר got this the last. It's a page before the last, or maybe the last page. No, page before the last. It's a scribble note, but unfortunately there's no marking for this, so I just have to write it out. So these are just a collect. You have this page? It looks like scribblings. So Aلیעזר Gadol is Ben Horkanes is the Gilgal of Reuven. Okay, Reuven, the son of Yaakov, was Mizgalgal and Aلیעזר Gadol. That's why he's called Gadol. Rabbi Yeshua, this is a different Sefer Kabbalah. This is a collection. Rabbi Yeshua was an ibur of Yeshua Kohen Gadol. Yeshua Kohen Gadol is the high priest, is Yeshua during the beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash, right? The famous the nevuos about the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. Yeshua is levush, he's dressed in dirty clothes, and Hashem tells him to take it off. This is the nevuah of Yeshua Kohen Gadol, which is the beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash. By the way, all the five didn't have to speak about Yitzias Mitzrayim technically, because either were Kohanim, Levim, or Ben Geir. That's another. So he was also a Levi. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah was a Gilgal of Shmuel Hanavi, because when Shmuel Hanavi passed away at 52, when he says Areini Kiben Shivim Shana, he was 18. He said Areini Kiben Shana, he was 18. 18 to 52 means he was actually 70. That's why Kiben Shivim Shana, Kiben Beis Nun is 52. Shana Shmuel Hanavi. right? And he could ben Shiva Shanam like Shmuel and Navi together to 52 becomes 70. But he was also, the Gemara actually mentions this, that he was also a grandchild of Ezra Sofer. Ezra Sofer, he was Yitzchak Chalatza from Ezra Sofer, and he's connected to Lazar. Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon is Gematria 345. He was a Kohen, and he's Moshe Rabbeinu. Rabbi Akiva is connected to Yaakov. And Akiva is also Yaakov. He's also connected to the Shechina, but mainly he's connected to the idea of Yaakov. Okay, let's understand this like this. First, Yaakov, then we'll go back to this. What is Yaakov? So Yaakov there's Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Avram and Yitzchak were the ones that established Shachris and Mincha, which means Avram is Chesed, Yitzchak is Vor, Shachris and Mincha, which means that they established the tefillah that's connected to days, today, Yom. Yaakov, Tikkun Tefillas Arvis, is connected to night, Kiva Shemesh, because the sun sets, and Yaakov is connected specifically to night. So Avram Yitzchak connected to day, and Yaakov is connected specifically to the night. Why? So the Ramban actually writes that when Yaakov was Alter Mitzrayim, when Yaakov was afraid to go to Mitzrayim, so the Ramban writes because he's going down to Mitzrayim because that's the beginning of Golus Mitzrayim, right? Yaakov basically when Yaakov comes down to Mitzrayim, that's the beginning of Golus. So Yaakov is the one that goes to descent into the place of Golus. That's Bechinas Yaakov. But what does Yaakov do? Yaakov is Metakan Tfilas Arvis means, the Tikkun of Tfilas Arvis means that in the Makam HaChoshech, in the place of darkness, you recognize that also over there is Vayifka Makam, there's a place to encounter Hashem. That Hashem is also there. But it's even more boimik. Not only is Hashem there, Chazal say that when it says that they took out the crush and the Amudim, to make the mission, they took out the Amudim, it was already filled. So the Torah doesn't say they should take wood and to make it into Amudim, to make it into Krashim for the Mishkan. It says that they already had the pieces of wood. How did they have the pieces of wood? So Rashi brings down a medrash to Chuma that Yaakov, when he came down to Mitzrayim, he planted these trees. So imagine Yaakov is the patriarch of Klal Yisrael, the father of everyone that's living there, right? He's the father of everybody. And you come by Yaakov's house for hundreds of years, and what do you see? Huge trees. And you ask your father, why are these trees here? Because one day we're going to get out of Mitzrayim and we're going to build a Mishkan. Which means that Yaakov, the concept of hope and possibility of faith in a place of the Makam HaChoshech is connected to Yaakov. So that's why on one Madreger they're going to Yaakov, the Daled, these four Tanoim end up by Yaakov Akiva, because Akiva is the Nekuda of the Tzachak, the one that's able to laugh, the one that's able to plant cedar trees, when eventually they come out of Mitzrayim. But there's even a bigger oimek. There's a bigger oimek. The bigger oimek is like this. If you'll notice, you'll see that all the Tanoim that were mentioned represent in terms of their Gilgal and the Neshamas. First of all, they're Tanoim, but they also represent the upholding of law. We're going to make a distinction over here. It's important to understand this. Remember we talked about in the beginning, there's the Hilchas HaPesach, the laws of Pesach, and the Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, the story of the Pesach. The law, the Hilchas HaPesach, is upholding the order, structure. Okay? That's what... Now, Bizman HaChurban, there is a disorder. That's what happens in Bizman HaChurban. There's a functioning of the Beis HaMikdash. The function of the Beis HaMikdash is day in, day out, structure. That's what the Beis HaMikdash represents. It represents the maintenance of structure in Klal Yisrael is the Beis HaMikdash. A parallel to that, because we don't have a Beis HaMikdash today, is Shachris and Mincha. Not Ma'ariv, because Ma'ariv is a Shus. The Chiyuv of Shachris and Mincha parallel the avodas hakoyin of Tom Shel Shachar, Tom Shel Ben Aboyim, which means every single day, whether you're in the mood or you're not in the mood, you daven Shachris and you daven Mincha. That's structure. That's giving structure and order to your life. Okay, that's the structure. All these Tanoim had a Gilgal that were connected to the world we could use another word. We can use like the word isha halacha, if you wish. There's the man of the immediate question of what has to be done right now. That's one type of person that lives. That's the man of the halacha, the halachic man, if you wish, which is like, what is halacha demanding right now from me to do at this present moment? That's the question that I ask. And then there's another question that I ask, which is the man of Isha Haggadah or Isha Abuna, if you want to call it. Whatever you want to call this person, it's a different type of question, this person, because this person's interested in relationship. This person's interested in, not in the law, but in the lore. Not in the halacha, but in the sipur, in the story. This person wants to have a relationship. I know what I want to do, but I want to know what's the bigger picture. Tell me the story. What's the story that we're filling in? You're in the following? It's a different type of hergish of a relation. Now, of course, they're both important. One is the structure of Klal Yisrael, which is very important to keep a certain type of continuity and continuation of a certain type of structure, to hold on to the certain type of order. And one is a different quality. When there was a disorder, Rebbe Elazar Gadol is a Gilgal of Reuven. Now Reuven is the Bechor, which serves originally in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Mishkan. That's the firstborn. Rabbi Yeshua is Yeshua Ken Gadol, is connected to the Navi. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is connected to Shmuel HaNavi, which is also is a Navi, which is a little different, but he's also connected to Ezra Sofer, who is also the man of the law, who's the person that writes a lot of the Torah, a lot of Tanakh is written by Ezra Sofer, right? If you know a little story of Ezra, I think Chazal actually say that Ezra Sofer, if all the Torah by Moshe Rabbeinu, Torah would have been given by Ezra Sofer, which means Ezra Sofer is the upholder of law, of structure. That's the story. When Klal Yisrael came back in the second Beis HaMikdash, Ezra Sofer is the one that said you should have married the non-Jewish woman, and he was the one that made order. And Rebbe Akiva and Reb Tarfon is Moshe Rabbeinu. Is the law? It's Moshe Emes Torah Emes. It's the Torah. Moshe is the law. Is the emes of the law. This is a certain quality of these Tanoim, and they're coming to Rabbi Akiva, who's the Bechina of Yaakov, which is very different because Yaakov, in contrast to the two of us, not only is it Yom and Laila, but the contrast also is that the nevuah that happens, the prophecy that happens to Avram Yitzchak is direct. Hashem speaks directly to Avram. It's nevuah, it's clear. Where do dreams start happening in the Torah? And where do all the dreams of the Torah happen? From the birth of Yaakov. Yaakov is the first one to have a dream. Hashem Mutzav Olav is in a dream. He has a dream. And once Yaakov has a dream, then the butlers have a dream, and the Pari has a dream, and the Yosef has a dream. Everyone's dreaming. But the Bechina of your dream is connected to Yaakov, because Yaakov is in the place of the unclarity of law, of structure, of exact order. In the world of law, in the world of immediate action, there's no two ways how to do it. There's only one way. Either you do it this way, or you don't do it this way. There's no great place in law. There's black and white. That's the definition of a law. The idea of a dream is a nice hafachim. A dream is a pil b'machta. You can see a pil b'machta, a kupa b'machta. You can see a elephant. No, you can't actually see a pil kupa b'machta. But you can see two opposites. You can see a gamo pereches. You can see like a flying dragon or a flying camel. Or sfina pereches, whatever. You can see something flying. Now you can see a lot of things flying, even life flying. But I'm just saying, the idea is that in dream, the dream idea is not sequential. That's what a dream is. A dream is a world. Alter Rebbe writes the difference between a dream and regular life is that regular life is in Kav, and in a dream is like in the Rishimu, in the level where everything is together, and or the eagle calls it the circle of life. In the circle of life, things happen simultaneous. Okay? What are they seeking? They're seeking to understand. They're seeking to understand how do we make sense of our lives? And I want to say this in two ways. How do we make sense of our lives in a world that's disordered, and we don't actually know how life is going to make sense? Because we had a Beis HaMikdash, we had everything structured, and we know it's like now we don't know that. So when we enter into the dream-like, night-like, gullus-like exile state, so there's two pressing questions here. One is, what is the story? What is the story that has to be told? What is the story that's happening to us? I don't know if this is coming through. I'll say this a little differently. some of the greatest Gedolei Yisrael that revealed a new Mahalach HaChaim in life, like revealed a new way of thinking about yourself, about the world, about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just like were great storytellers. And great storytellers not only means that they can actually tell a good story. That's one thing. But what it means, a great story, they gave people a story to understand their lives. Why did Arizal, for example, why was Arizal so popular? I mean, Dari, I'm not going to say why is it, but let's say why we can understand why Dari was so popular. But let's say Dari was not Dari, but let's say Dari was not Dari. Why was Dari popular? One of the reasons why Dari was so popular and why it became so widespread in Europe, his teachings, is because they just lived through the most traumatic experience that Klal Yisrael ever had for 1,000 years, or over since the Churban, which was the expulsion of Jews of Spain, which means that the Rav Binyan of Klal Yisrael were living in this pocket, this area, which is all the Gedolei Yisrael, that 90% of the Gedolei Yisrael, when you think about the Rishonim, are from that part of the world, and all of a sudden, and then there's no one there. Every from Jew left, every person that was committed to Yiddishkeit left this place. They were dispersed and then throughout the world. They went into Turkey, they went all on the road to Amsterdam, they went into the New World, they went to Recife, they went to Brazil, they went all over. The New World is all because of this. Comes along the Arizal, and I don't want to use the word trauma because that's like a whatever, but because some people, let's say there was a major event in history. People didn't have a story to tell themselves. What is the story? We understood, okay, we're in Galus, we're Fahakt, we're here in Europe. Okay, we'll figure it out. We're going to be with Spain, and then, well, till Mashiach comes.
Is it like Where's Waldo? Like we are part of
yes, came out like that. But it's more, what's the meta narrative that's going to allow us to function in Galus for the next while? Comes along the Arizal and says that there's something called Shivir Sakelim. There's broken vessels. There's the tzotzes that spread out throughout the entire world. Your job is to collect the sparks. And all of a sudden people say, okay, now I find myself in very strange places that I never knew. Here I'm in Spain for 1,000 years. Okay, I know the Spanish culture. I know the poetry. I know the whole Haggadah. I like it. I don't like it. Okay, but I know where I am. All of a sudden I'm in a foreign land. People are, doing things differently. There's different tastes, different smells, different colors. What am I doing here? The tzotzes, the sparks. You have to elevate the sparks, and every person's understanding. And that was the story. That's the meta story that the Arizal revealed. I'm not saying that the Arizal was a good storyteller, but he told the perfect story that Klal Yisrael was able to listen to, and that made sense out of their life. That's the same thing also with the Baal Shem. Baal Shem gave us a story that allowed us to exist. One of the major things that the Baal Shem, actually, in the famous letter that he has Elias on the Neshama, one of the things that he asks is he meets the Samach Mem, and what disturbs the Baal Shem in the vision, and he wants to ask, like the belly of the beast, the Samach Mem himself, he wants to ask, why is it that Klal Yisrael, there used to be an issue that if you shmad, let's say Chas Sholme, let's say the Jews in Spain, you had an option that if you converted and if you left Yiddishkeit, then you survived. So people went on Mesiras Nefesh not to do that, but then they were killed. But if they didn't, they were survived. In the times before the Baal Shem, a little in that time period, but it's a little after Xeris Tachatat, there was a new decree, and there was a big to do in one of the cities in Poland where they asked a bunch of Jews who's going to convert. A lot of them unfortunately did. A lot of them said didn't. The ones that they didn't, they killed right away. The one that they converted, they killed the next day. And the Baal Shem was very disturbed by this, and this is what he asked the Samach Mem, and he says, Mela, you're saying that we want us to hold on to our Yiddishkeit. Okay, so we're going to fight for it. Now you're saying ben kach, it doesn't matter. Whatever we can do, they're going to kill us. This is a new type of anti-Semitism, and this, unfortunately, we suffered the worst brunt of it in the last 100 years. So this is what did the Baal Shem come along? So Baal Shem came along and revealed a meta story. The meta story is that every person has a chelik, every yid has a chelik al mamash, and you saw av b'shachatu. This is the story. You understand? That's the real story of the Baal Shem. Baal Shem is teaching a story that there's who you are and there's what you do. So no matter what you do, you're still who you are. And and that whole story is a chiddush nifla of the Baal Shem. Meaning the Baal Shem revealed a new oil in this world that said, yes, you do this, yes, you do that, you don't do that. Doesn't matter. Of course it matters in terms of how you live your life. But he's saying in the essence of who you are, that will never change you. That was the story. It's that. Let's go.
How like the base of Levi to tie like back where he says that also the Baal Shem Tov existing is
creates the story.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
That's how.
Correct.
That's
Correct. He creates the story. I agree. That's another conversation. He creates the story. But this is what they're coming to Rebbe Akiva. Again, this is what they're coming to Rebbe Akiva. They're coming to Rebbe Akiva they're coming to Rebbe Akiva to understand the story. What is the story? They're not going to Rebbe Gamliel. To go to Rebbe Gamliel, you're going to get the halacha. Hilchas HaPesach. What do you have to do Line Pesach? Hilchas Pesach. What their bother is, we're in the middle of Gullus, and you're telling us it's Balayla, it's dark, and you're telling us that we have to be Misap Mitzvahs and Sign Balaylas. Or maybe we have to be Misap Mitzvahs blind, because now it's not just physically dark, but it's spiritually dark. So do we have to Misap Mitzvahs and Sign Balaylas? What are we doing here, and how are we going to understand this? So they're coming to Rebbe Akiva. They're coming to Rebbe Akiva to hear what Rebbe Akiva. They're coming to hear this from Rebbe Akiva, and they're also coming to hear something even deeper than that, which is, that's the story that they're coming to hear from Rebbe Akiva. And the Saprim. Here's a few little shtiklach over there. That's before we forget. There's a lot more to learn, but unfortunately, time is right. Bnei Brak is the gematria of Shin Ayin. And Shin Ayin has the same, also Shin Ayin is the Shin Ayin Nuhurin, which is, we're going to talk, if you have a second, we'll see what the Zohar says about it. Shin Ayin Nuhurin is the 370 lights. These are very, very high levels, high madrigas, high levels that are revealed. And Maisa, the word Maisa is Ma Ayin Shin, Shin Ayin. The story is the revealing of the Shin Ayin. That's why Shema, at the end of the story, when they come, they say, Shema Shel Shachris, Shema is Shin Ayin. They're coming to reveal the Shin Ayin Nehurim, which means that there's going to be a level and that's why specifically in Bnei Brak, specifically in the story, the Sipur, is the Maisa that's going to reveal the Shin Ayin Nehurim. Okay. There's one level of the story is...
Also the first story on Little Pesach was Cain and Hevel.
Yeah.
Right? Vayisha.
Oh, Yisra, excellent. Correct. Okay. So there's one level is to understand Baleilos, to understand in the place of the darkness, to understand the story. And then there's another level which is to enter into the world of story. It's different. Rabbi Akiva was able to look at Shir Hashirim and say that it's Kodesh HaKodashim. There's a type of unpacking of a story. Let me say, sometimes you hear a story, it's a real story. Let's say let me get a story. Sometimes you hear a story and you right away, okay, so there's the linear part of the brain, which is very like halachic part of the brain. The halachic part of the brain wants to know, okay, so what am I doing with this information? So I tell you a story, and they say, okay, so what's the musahas? What am I going to do? Okay, this is the story, so that means X, Y, Z, this is what I'm going to do. That's one way of thinking about a story. The other way of thinking about a story is the story has a truth in itself. The truth lies in the tale, not in the interpretation of the story. A lot of people wrote commentaries to very famous stories, to the stories of Rav Nachman, or even pieces of the Zohar. I think it's a shtickle toss. It's a shtickle mistake. The story doesn't lie in its interpretation. That the Melech is really Zohar Ampin, the Malka is really what? You just took a story and you put it into a halacha, into a left brain process, into dissecting. The story is the magic of the story in it itself.
It's like putting matzah into wine.
Exactly. You're mixing two. When you hear, it's like mystical poetry. I don't know if there's a good word for this. Huh?
It's like a literary.
Yeah, you're trying to be a literary critic to mystical poetry. You're not supposed to. That ruins this. That is the ruining of the process. The story itself. You're going to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is the story. Rabbi Akiva is not the interpretation of the story. Rabbi Akiva is the person that lives the story. Which not he lives the story. He embodies all these paradoxical forces in some type of magical, mystical way that he's holding heaven and earth together. Rabbi Akiva is the person that is nichlas b'shalom v'yatz b'shalom. He's the person that can go to the highest place and go to the lowest places. Rabbi Akiva is the person that could say Baruch Shekacha B'Elamai and he's the person that has, the highest levels of Achtus Hashem, of oneness of Hashem. Yotzei Nishmas Be'echad. That Rabbi Akiva is a person that says there's no Mayim. I'll tell you about Mayim. Don't say the separate waters. There's no separation. Somehow Rabbi Akiva, in the harmony, in the mystical harmony of the story, he's holding the paradox of all of existence simultaneously. And what the Tanoim, and what we're coming to the story is, when we're entering to the story of Pesach is, we don't only want to know how it fits, try to figure out like the critically to understand, okay, where exactly are we in history? How it's going to develop? Why are we here to move there? I get it. People want to understand because people are stuck and people are having, I'm talking about in personal life. You're stuck, you're uncertain. So it would be nice to say like, okay, this is the unfolding is like it's moving in this direction. That's why it's going to unfold. But life itself is the story. Life itself is that unfolding of your own story that holds all these paradoxes together. And the one thing that you're supposed to do in the story is just be in the story without actually trying to dissect what the story is. Because dissection of the story is already an interpretation.
What about status or action?
I'm talking, I'm not talking about like, I'm not saying always and every, I'm just giving you, there's a certain way sometimes being that the way of being, and this is the oimik of why we say Halai Lazeh. Halai Lazeh, if you look in the Shalach Kodesh, I'll get back to you in a second. The Halai Lazeh is, the Shalach Kodesh writes, there's a girl also, Mendel Shlomo writes in Shem HaGra, that Laila is Lashon Nekeva, is feminine. Hazeh is masculine. It should really say Halai Lazois. It should say the feminine, you should use a feminine term for the feminine night. And when you say Man Ishtana Halai Lazeh, the question is, not what you say. Why is this night the holder of paradox? Why is this night halayla, which is feminine, also masculine? Why is this night that every other mitzvah in the Torah we do by day? There's no mitzvahs by night. I don't know if you know this. Mitzvahs you do by day. Lulav you shake by day. Shofar you blow by day. Pesach is the only Yom Tov that you do mitzvahs by night. Why is this night demand an action? Why is a woman, which represents night, which is the passive, absence of doing, also a mechuyev in this night, in matzah min haTorah? In other words, why is this night holding a paradox, or we spoke like last week? Why is this night a matzah that is matzah of cheres and a matzah of a poor man's bread? It's lechem oini. What is with this night? What is this night? And the answer is Nishtana Laila Zeh. That's what it is. Laila Kayam Yor. That's what the Shalom Kodesh answers. Laila Kayam Yor means that the darkness becomes lit. Now Laila Kayam Yor is a paradoxical statement because if you say Laila Kayam Yor, then it's not Laila, right? It's Kayam Yor. You can't have both statements and say them true, but it could be. You could hold that awareness in both light and darkness in the same time. Now you're asking a question of how do you live your life. I don't think this is trying to say that you're supposed to, maybe yeah, but not. It's saying that there's a certain type of consciousness or awareness that comes Leila Seder, and this is the story of the four Tanaim that are coming to Rabbi Akiva, but it's us really coming to the story of Leila Seder, that we're coming to. There's a certain type of awareness that one is that we want to understand the structure and the unfolding, where the Isha Halachat is trying to figure out exactly what's happening here. So even when we're told the story, we want to know what is the narrative exactly telling us in the story. But there's another type of thing is we want to just be in that place. We want to be in a redemptive state, even in the state when we're not redemptive, because this is the story of what happens on Pesach night. We're sitting in Choshech. You're sitting in Galus. And yet you're saying that you're sitting in Galus, but it's a Leila Cheres. It's Laila Kiyam Yar. It is light.
The fact that you're experiencing it, your story that creates the freedom.
The fact that you can hold these things. I don't know if
but you're not restricted by being so dissecting.
I would say by not being linear.
Yeah.
Stop being
And analytical.
analytical. Exactly.
Being present.
Correct.
In the non.
Being a present in a non-analytical way. Correct. And everything merges together in a certain type of wholeness, a certain type of harmony that brings, like there's a certain type of pleasure, a certain type of tainug, where it's not a resolution. You're not coming out and saying, it's not definitive, it's not light, it's a cholam, it's a dream. It's the makam hachoshech, it's the place of Yaakov. That's why it's Akiva is that nekuda. If you look at this few oases from the Zohar over here, that is from the Tzemach Tzedek over here, Derech Mitzasecha. We missed it? Shlomo? Yeah, Ner Chanukah, where's that? Okay. Okay, fine. So over here. So he has like this. He wants to explain. He's explaining a little what the Shinai Norim are. What is these lights? So there's oasis. These are Chassidish oasis for a Kabbalistic idea, which is important. It's what when you understand the Tzemach Tzedek, this Derech Tzedek, you're going to understand what the experience of it is. What is the experience of how you Mesap Mitzias Mesayim Kol Eisa Laila? I think we answered all the questions, by the way. No, L'chura. B'nai Brak and why they're there. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So he likes this. Oiru b'chinas aras panim, the arachamtim. This light is called the light of the face of arachamtim. Arachamtim is the lower level of Kesser. It's the middle, the center page. It's 144, maybe 10 lines from the bottom. Hanika sha'ashuyim. This goes back to what you were saying, Radha, Shlomo. Hanika sha'ashuyim is called sha'ashuyim. Shashuyim shin ayin nuhurim. Shashuyim, pleasure. This idea of Shashuyim melech batzmusay, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes pleasure in himself, represents the idea of the shin ayin nuhurim. Because sha. What's Shashuyim? Shashuyim means like a shashuyim, to play with, a toy. So Shashuyim is double shin ayin. Because when you have one sha is linear. Like if I turn, let's say I'm driving, I don't drive, but let's say you're driving and you turn, you're walking, you make a turn. So Shashuyim is a turn into the direction, which is linear. What's Shashuyim? Sha. Sha means a circle. In other words, I'm spinning I'm turning for the sake of turning again, which means that is a level of pleasure, because pleasure is not in a direction. That's intention. I need to get to that place. Shashuyim is like when you're playing with a toy, let's say, for example. I don't know, let's say you're playing with toys. Everyone has their own toys. Shashuyim is I'm just enjoying the process of just enjoying the process. I'm not trying to win. I'm not trying to gain something. I'm just enjoying myself. Music. Yeah. Like Shashuyim for the sake of Shashuyim. It's a turning for the sake of turning. This is Shashuyim Melech. This is the Sipur, the Maisa. Okay, one second. Okay, it said the Gemara says that when Ravu Matzah Tosefta Chadata, his face lit up, and and his cheeks became filled with like red. It became red. It showed that he showed. After eating gashi, This is the essence of pleasure. Yeah. He was excited. Also, that was the second thing. But the fact is, like, it was a physical pleasure for him. Though he was an intellectual, let's say, and he found Tosefta Chadata, and he was very excited. But it showed up. It showed up in his face. But the real tainug is atzis atayni shebichidish v'nefesh. It's really atzis atayni shebichidish v'nefesh, which means it's the pure pleasure of being. Exactly, of the beingness of pleasure. Not I'm eating to have pleasure and I'm doing this to have pleasure. It's the experience itself of pleasure. The being of pleasure. This is Shashuyim Melech. This is Shashuyim. And then, you'll read soon. It's a whole arichas, but then he goes over here. There's no tzimtzum, no cyrus. Therefore, in the cheeks there's no hair. This is Shashuya Melech Batzmusay. Shashuya Melech Batzmusay, which is a chiddush, which is the king takes pleasure in itself. It doesn't say in Kisveri. It comes from Yisol Saruk. This is the Emek HaMelech. Shashuya Melech Batzmusay means the level of pure tainuk for the sake of tainuk. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create the world? Why is a linear question. And in a linear question, you can answer a linear answer. But in a place that there's no linear, what's the answer?
Right now.
Just because. I don't need a reason.
When a person's having tainug atzmi, it's not an answer to a question. It's the holding of all the paradoxes and everything of your life in this perfect harmony of a smile. It shows up in your cheeks. Shlomi, did I answer your question? This is the magical level of living. And this is what they were seeking by Rabbi Akiva. They were seeking by a person that was able to laugh in the face of death. A person that was able to smile in the face of destruction. A person that was able to hold all, and it wasn't an ivory tower. Rabbi Akiva was not a person that was separated from Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Akiva was very much a person that was involved. He had tens of thousands of Talmidim. Rabbi Akiva was and he carried even the story, and like the Rambam says that he carried the shield of Bar Kochva. Rabbi Akiva was a very involved person, and he was the biggest god of Kol Libid Rabbi Akiva. Everything follows Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva was the greatest scholar, the greatest lover, and the greatest person of that generation, and great is already linear. So it doesn't work. He was just Rabbi Akiva. So when you're in the presence of Rabbi Akiva, this is what they were seeking by Rabbi Akiva. They were going through Gullus, and they're going through pain. And it was a very hard time. And again, it's not only in historical context. It's also a hard time now. It's Makam HaChoshech. There's people struggling. There's people still in darkness. People still feel very hurt and for a lot of pain. And comes Pesach night, and you say this cheres. So what's the cheres? Maskim Yitzis Mitzrayim B'Leis. What does it mean Maskim Yitzis Mitzrayim B'Leis? Could we Maskim Yitzis? Could we speak about Mitzrayim? They're going out of Egypt. Could we speak about freedom on the night of exile, on the night of darkness? And the answer is yes. You just have to tell the correct story. Maisa Rabbi Akiva, you have to tell the Maisa, you have to tell over the story. You have to enter into that world of the Sipur, into the world of Shashuya Melech Batzmusay. And we enter the world of Shashuya Melech Batzmusay, and that's why there was also 5 Talmidim. Because the 5 Talmidim is Yechid Shem Nefesh. That's the 5. The 4 represents the 4 linear ways, the halachic ways. Pshat Emes Zush Soid, which Soid is then just is another element of Pshat Emes Zush Soid, just another avenue. And then there's the Razin. The secret of the secret includes all the other. Is not separate. It's not pshat, remez, drush, soid, razin, the razin. The razin, the 5th madrega is nichol everything. That's why Rabbi Akiva goes back to what he says, kol makav v'makish, kol shachamish makas. Because Rabbi Akiva was the nekuda of the 5th element that was able to hold all the paradoxes together. And this is why Rabbi Akiva says, according to the Barbanel, he says dayenu. What's dayenu? Everyone makes a mistake about dayenu. They think that dayenu means linear. Which means, most people think it means, that if he did this and didn't do that, this would be enough. So then the question is, that if Hashem took through the water and didn't split the sea, but then we were drowned. So you have to come up to Teretz. I'm not sure. So why cover the Torah? You have to say, cover the Torah. You don't need a teretz. You're missing the whole point. What is Rabbi Akiva saying? Dayenu. What does Dayenu mean? Dayenu. Dayenu is not, it's the experience now. Don't tell me, I feel enough because this happened. If this happened, then you're not feeling enough. Because this happened, then the other thing cannot happen. And another thing, then you're not going to feel enough. What's chayers? Chayers is not Chaos is not the opposite of the opposite of chaos. Freedom is not the opposite of slavery. Because if freedom is the opposite of slavery, then today you're a slave, then you're free, then tomorrow you're a slave again. Right? Doesn't help. In the linear world, you're never chaos. If I say there's a question is galus, a teretz, an answer is gula. Okay, but then tomorrow we have another question. Right? In the linear way of thinking, there's never a way to get out of this wheel, because the definition of the wheel is that it's a wheel. One goes to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. But you're trying to reach a madrigal chayers. Comes Rabbi Akiva. You don't even have to have Rabbi Akiva coming. Rabbi Akiva being Rabbi Akiva living on the fifth level of Yechidah, Shashuya Melech Batzmusay, being on the madrigal of the fifth Makkah, being on the level of Dayenu. He says Dayenu is Dayenu Dayenu. Ilu Aitzianu V'loi B'charav Dayenu. Why? Because that's Dayenu. Dayenu means I'm always in the place of whole. I'm always in the place. This is the magical, mysterious, mystical world of the story, of the Sipur. Not with the interpretation of the story, which is linear, but in the being in the story in itself, which is the oimek of how he's supposed to be on Seder night. So these are the two mahalchim. The mahalch of Rabbi Gamliel says, what do you do on the Seder night? A brisker Torah. Another Rambam, another Shagas Aryeh, slug it up with a griz, and then you figure it out. And then what's the chiddush tonight? And fine, you're Yotzei Gamliel's Seder. But if you want Rabbi Akiva Seder, then the Maisa, then it's a Maisa. Then you're telling a story. We should have a Geula Pratis V'Klolis B'Meher V'Yameinu.